Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys are medical practitioners? Okay, got a few. How many of you are already aware of what ozone therapy is or have some knowledge around it? Okay, cool. So there's a lot of people who don't know about ozone therapy, so we're going to be talking about that today. And it's a super oxygen for cellular vitality. So we're basically going to be covering just all things ozone therapy today, how it works in the body, what it's doing, what the benefits are, what the safety of it is, and all that kind of stuff. So in about 60 minutes, hopefully you'll look like this person. You'll become a raving fan of ozone therapy and kind of get started with what this can do for you guys. So if you guys don't know who I am, my name is Micah. I have really helped in popularizing ozone therapy in the United States. Obviously not super popular since only half of you even know what it is, but here I am. I'm trying to do my job. So we've added 10,000 more doctors. We have a training entity to this treatment that are applying it to patients. They can do it in IVs. They can do a lot of different stuff. And hundreds of thousands of patients have now gotten ozone therapy through the work that we've been doing with like Todd, who also works with me, and we have a really, really good team of people that are doing this. But the reason I got into ozone therapy is because my brother was diagnosed with a form of rare brain cancer. So he was going through the Johns Hopkins medical system, which is like poster boy of cancer, right? So it's like you're in good hands. And through that process, became very disenchanted with kind of the medical system. So I was going through nursing school, was an EMT, working in a pharmacy, eventually going to become a doctor, and that was kind of the track that I was on. But with Matt getting brain cancer, they're giving treatments and doing this kind of stuff. But he lived quite a bit longer than they expected. And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I'm not here to do that. Obviously, there's like good things in both systems of thought and conventional and how they do that. So just take that with a caveat. But this was just kind of our journey into it. But it turned into this situation where they were really just like, hey, we don't really have anything we can do. We can try experimental stuff, which included like experimental brain surgeries. And like there was this one drug they gave him that was like super, super toxic, like tons of downsides to it, very, very negative for people. But the upside that, hopefully going to attack the cancer only worked for 13% of people, and that was based on if they had a certain genotype. So Johns Hopkins, again, right? Poster child of like cancer therapy. They didn't even test him for the genotype. They just gave it to him just to kind of see what happened. So really treated him as a stat line and not so much as a person. They weren't like really focused on him as a person. And so that kind of just opened up my mind of like, hey, I really want to help Matt to, have a better quality of life. How are we going to do that? So that opens up this world of like, let's look into alternatives. Let's look into some integrative stuff, some naturals, and see what else is out there. So along that journey, found hyperbaric oxygen, which I'm still shocked at how many people don't know about that. It's phenomenal what it can do. But that really, really helped him in his quality of life and energy and clearing up a lot of brain fog that he had, with all these surgeries, had lost a lot of his critical thinking processes and things of that nature. But through that also found ozone therapy, and it's a really long story, but long story short, I started producing content and information about ozone therapy because it was like just this really big subject. There was a lot of science out there. There was, at the time, I think over 1,800 medical studies. Now there's over 2,500. But if you wanted to get a consensus on how does ozone therapy work with cancer, you have to read like 150, 300 studies to kind of get start to get a glimpse of what it's really doing. So I was like, well, I have time and, I'm kind of interested in this, so I can read that. So I started to put together like not research, but just to compile this research and use like layman's terms to explain what's going on and give kind of a status update, so to speak, on the research. And that got me started with some credibility in this space in terms of people started asking me about ozone therapy, and that evolved into starting a company that sells the equipment, which evolved into starting up a training entity that trains doctors. And so that's what I do now, is I operate those two businesses. So my goal in life is to reduce suffering in the world, and that's really the intention of this business, is how can we bring this to people that in a way that's hopefully going to help them. And really any business that I touch is going to be somehow oriented around that. So, and my wife and I have 4 kids, so big family guy. As far as, I just show people this. I'm not trying to sell anybody, but this is a slide set I sometimes use for doctors. So There'll probably be some technical aspects to it, but I think it's good regardless. So I show people this process just so that they understand conceptually what it actually takes to get started with something like this. You can also go to a clinic and get IVs, but there's no like expectation of people to buy. But usually we go through some sort of education process, so like a training to understand what the therapy is, then people buy. Then they do hands-on training at home, so there's like videos and explainers and that kind of stuff, because there is a little bit of a learning curve. I don't want to make it sound like it's super, super easy when it's not. So, but if you take and say like, I'm going to focus on this for a couple hours, and that's really all you need. And then from there, after a few months, people are generally seeing results. So let's start getting into the meat of it though. What is ozone therapy? So simply put, ozone therapy is the use of ozone gas. Ozone gas is O3, while oxygen is O2, so it has an extra oxygen atom on there. And the upside to that is that it's a very unstable molecule. So it interacts with different properties very differently. But when we put it into the body, it has a very beneficial response that it elicits. So ozone therapy is using that molecule and applying it in some capacity to the body. That can be done in an IV, that can be done through the ears, that can be done rectally, vaginally. There's a lot of different ways to apply it. So that's just kind of the larger context of what we're talking about. I should have had a little bit more explainer slides in there. So ozone therapy, we're taking that gas, we're applying it to the body, but on a base level, what it's doing is it's causing like a stress. So wherever we apply it into the body, let's say we put it into the blood, it's considered a hormetic therapy. So that would be like exercise, ice baths, sauna, things of that nature. So we're actually causing a little bit of a stress, and it's going into the body and making it stronger, essentially. So the reason that's hormesis is such a good thing is because when you think of drugs, you think of something that's usually turning a system on or turning a system off. It's very binary in its approach. Whereas this is more of just a catalyst for the body to do what it does well. And that's why hormetic therapies can be so powerful, is because we're not forcing the body to do anything. We're just trying to engage its natural properties, the intelligence of the body, so that the body can do what it does best. And a healthy body is going to outperform any drug. For people that don't know about ozone therapy, you might not even be aware of a discussion, but there's a lot of people that live in the cities. I don't know if Austin has this, but they'll say like the ozone levels are such and such today. So in like Los Angeles or different cities. So people have this like tie to ozone therapy as like a negative thing because they hear of ozone and they think of it as, oh, isn't that like a dangerous thing that you don't want to be breathing? So I'm going to really quickly go through the safety and kind of explain that standpoint of it, because we look at safety, then we go into efficacy and start to understand it from that train of thought. But the reason, I'll get into that. But there's 5 different areas that I look at to inform myself about the safety of ozone therapy. The first being the biochemistry is really well established. I mean, we've been studying it in depth for like 60 years. So it has a lot of biochemistry that's very well understood behind it. It's approved in over 20 different countries. It did make it through the FDA safety process at one point, and I'm going to get into this more. There's really good clinical reports on it. One was an assessment on over 300,000 IV ozone treatments, and they found, they were looking at the adverse event rate and all that. There's over 2,000 medical studies on it. That should say 2,500. This is a little bit dated, but there's over 2,500 medical studies on it. And there's over 10 million treatments done per year just with ozone therapy. That is looking at different disciplines, so that would be like the medical IVs, patients doing it at home, dental applications, injections, aesthetic work, so that is a lot of different disciplines, but there's a lot of treatments that are done every single year with ozone therapy, and that's just in North America. All 5 of those, it's really just the whole picture that it's creating. It's not like any one of those are like, hey, that's exactly what I'm looking at and what I need. I think they all have elements of validation within them. But the basic knowledge, and this is really the most important thing to understand from the safety standpoint of why people have this misnomer, this misunderstanding of the safety of ozone therapy, is because you can't breathe it. So what are we breathing in as we're just sitting here breathing? We're breathing oxygen, right? We're aerobic beings. So our lungs don't have this thing called the antioxidant buffering system. Because if we had that in there, we wouldn't be able to breathe in oxygen very well. Antioxidants are protection against oxidants and oxygen and that kind of stuff. But the lungs do not have that system because we need to be able to take and breathe that oxygen. But that system is pretty much present everywhere else in the body, because when we breathe in the oxygen, it breaks down, it causes oxidants, and so the body needs a way of discarding that. So it has this very robust antioxidant system in all other parts of the body, such as the blood. So that's why we can take something like ozone, which is, something you can't breathe, and you can safely apply it into the blood, is because it interacts with that antioxidant, which is a protection against the oxidative properties of ozone. So oxidation, if you guys don't know, that's when, like ozone, I could apply it to like a latex glove, and it'd actually just start to like disappear, like almost vanish into thin air. Well, what's happening? The oxidant is going and breaking down those materials. So you don't want that to happen in your lungs, right? It would cause irritation, it would cause coughing, it would cause things like that. And it's not permanent damage, but it would be uncomfortable. So the story of Vasogen, I'm going to go through this pretty fast on the safety side of things, because I think the more interesting part is like what it's actually doing. But long story short, $225 million in research. They made it through stages 1 and 2 of the FDA trials. What happened was there was this group of business guys with money, right? So they're looking for companies to invest in to make a big return on. So they go to this group of scientists and say, like, hey, we have this money, we want to allocate it somewhere. What's something that we should look into to push through the FDA? And the scientists go, let's do ozone therapy. It works for a lot of different stuff. It can be really beneficial, and we think that'd be great. And the business guys go, that sounds awesome, but we need to go after something really big. So they go back to the scientists and say, you need to make this as big as possible because we're not looking for like an incremental return. It's not like I want a 10%. It's like I want to turn this $10 into $1,000 kind of thought process. So they generally go after really big things. And what they chose was chronic heart failure stage 3. And that's where they made the error. They did find that it was safe. So FDA trials, stages 1 and 2, are looking at safety. They do verify that. And then they start to get into efficacy, just kind of a little bit more generally. And then stage 3 is looking at the specific indication. So in the case of chronic heart failure stage 3, they found that it doesn't reverse the damage that's already done. So the scientists published that report, and all the investors are like, this is a dump, let's move on. So they pull out all their money, and the thing fails. But they could have pushed through if they wanted to. It's just a matter of making a return on your investment. Reports, again, over 300,000 IV treatments were assessed in this report by the International Scientific Committee of Ozone Therapy, and they found an adverse event rate of 6 in 100,000, none of which were like dangerous, life-threatening, anything like that. But that's lower than the use of aspirin, and it was usually associated with the use of heparin, which is a drug that we put into the blood when we pull it out. It's an anticoagulant, so it prevents the blood from clotting. And so some people can't take that if they're on like prescription blood thinners because it makes your blood more thin. So you don't want to do that. So in all those cases, it was pretty much malpractice where the practitioner wasn't doing due diligence to ensure, like, is this person on blood thinners? Do they have anemia? Asking some of those questions. So extremely, like almost like mind-boggling safe in the use of ozone. Over, again, it says 2,000, it should say 2,500, over 2,500 medical studies on ozone therapy, and those do range in credibility. So you have studies that are like double blinds, that are clinical trials, that are like really formal, right? And ozone does have those. But then on the other side, in this range, this big group of studies, you have some that are like a doctor that's assessing, 5, 6 patients and saying, this is what I gave them, this was the protocol I used, and this is what I saw from that. And what I'm really extrapolating from all these studies is not that like any one in particular, I mean, they do touch on safety, but the overall message is just massive that ozone therapy is safe. I mean, there's 2,500 medical studies done by independent groups all over the world doing different techniques and using stuff and finding incredible safety with it. So I'm going to move on to what does it do? So this is the important part, right? So what is that ozone therapy actually doing? When we apply it into the blood, when we do a home method, when we do a sauna with ozone, what is it actually doing for the body? And there's a lot of things that it's doing. Based on everything I've read, which is a lot, I like to break it down into 4 primary categories. The first of that being immunity. It works with the immune system. And it does that through immune modulation, which means we're balancing out the immune system. So in the case of an autoimmune disorder, somebody's immune system is attacking the body. It doesn't have a very good sense of what is good and what is bad. It's just kind of attacking everything. So that would be like an autoimmune disorder. And then on the other side of that, there's people that are undergoing cancer and are immunosuppressed. So they're likely to get an infection, and that's not good. So what does ozone therapy do? Well, it balances out that immune system. So if your immune system is too high, it brings it down here, and if it's underperforming, it's bringing it up here. And that's a really, really good thing, because you don't want to just boost your immune system. What our body craves is homeostasis, so the balance of all these things. It's really about the balance, and that's how it's helping with the immune system. The second thing is oxygen efficiency. Oxygen efficiency is how well our cells are actually utilizing oxygen to metabolize and convert it into energy. So as we're breathing in, that's the amount of air I'm drawing in. That's not oxygen efficiency. That would be like a VO2 max or some sort of other measurement. Oxygen efficiency is referring to when I breathe my oxygen in, how well are my cells taking that oxygen and actually starting to convert it into energy? And that's a really important process for energy creation and really everything in our body. And that also declines with age. So you can see very clear parameters. When you're born, you're at your highest oxygen utilization or efficiency. And as you age, that slowly declines, and it cascades into a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about. But it helps improve oxygen efficiency, which is why people have alleviation of brain fog, or athletes use it. A lot of professional teams use it, and all that stuff. Microcirculation, it sounds kind of benign. So this is blood flow, essentially, right? And like blood flow is not very sexy, right? It's just blood flow, it's things going, and it's like, yeah, your body's doing that. But it's actually very important, because at the base level, blood flow is nutrient and gas exchange. So, I mean, your fingertips need it, all your organs need it. And as that process starts to break down, your brain gets less nutrients, it gets less gas exchange, so it's not offloading byproduct as well, and it's not accepting the nutrients that it needs. So microcirculation is another thing that ozone, like the reason I put it on here is because you can go out there, and I'm not sure if anybody in this hall, but pretty often you'll see companies have these pictures of blood flow before and after their treatment, and it's always better after the treatment, right? Turns out that's actually pretty easy to do, is to get somebody temporarily improved in blood flow. I mean, you can exercise, you can run around, you can do whatever, do an ice bath, do a sauna, and the blood flow will improve for a select period of time. But the difference with ozone therapy is that it's like really next level in that area, that it works with like really tough diseases like peripheral vascular disease, all the way to the point, like to the most severe stages. So it really improves microcirculation. And there's some interesting points with it we'll get into. It's almost intelligent in how it works with microcirculation. If you need it, it gives it, and if you don't, it doesn't give you any boost. And then it mitigates chronic oxidative stress. So I know I'm using a lot of jargon. I apologize. Again, I kind of was thinking practitioners when I made the slide set. I should have boiled it down a little bit more. But oxidative stress is essentially, again, your body craves balance, right? So inside of your body, there's these things called antioxidants, which we all associate as being a good thing. Well, yes, they are. And generally, people need antioxidants more than they need oxidants. But they're not inherently a good thing. It's the balance and the relationship between those things that's the good thing. So you want your antioxidants to be balanced with your oxidants, because your oxidants are responsible for your immune system. They help to kill off bugs and infections and do all these very important things in your body. But what happens is usually as people age, we get this imbalance. And it's supposed to be this really tight loop between antioxidants and oxidants. And we want that in good balance. But as we age, we start to get more oxidants. And the antioxidants get lower. And it gets more and more out of whack. And so what's happening is the body is starting to break itself down. So if you have a lot of oxidative stress, that essentially means that your cells are being destroyed at a quicker rate than they should be. So, oh shoot, did I just cover like pretty much everything before? And so this is a slide on oxygen efficiency, just showing like the decline with age and some of the parameters there. Why is that a problem? Well, if you're not using oxygen well, it pretty much decreases all of your bodily capability slowly over time, so reduced ability to cover, reduced ability to deliver oxygen, reduce muscle mass, reduce blood flow. And these are just like a few of the points that I put on here. I could have put like 100. Reduced capillary function, microcirculation, dysfunctional cells, decreased nitric oxide production, and failing mitochondrial function. So the chart there is just showing that somebody that in a typical world and like the typical audience, that somebody that's older generally doesn't recover as quickly as somebody who's younger. And that's a sign of the oxygen, or that's a measurement of the oxygen efficiency. So how does ozone therapy help in a tangible way? So we're getting down into a little bit more tangibles, like what could you actually expect from it? So this was a study done that's called Doping That Is Not Doping, Effects of Ozone Therapy in Sports. So VO2 max is how much oxygen you're actually drawing in and like kind of at a base level utilizing. But it was increased in 28% in the ozone therapy treated athletes, but 12% in the control group. So they had two groups of people and they say, hey, what is your VO2 max? We're gonna test it before, during, and after this treatment over, I think this was an 8 or 12-week period, I can't remember exactly. And then they have a group of people that's doing the exact same program, exact same type of people, like professional athletes. This was, I think, semi-pro soccer players or something in Turkey. But they have those two groups. So you have somebody to compare against, right? Because you need that point of contrast to understand what the benefits are. So what they found was that people who were doing ozone therapy, if they did 4 treatments in 2 months, they had an increase of 28% in VO2 max over the control. Max running time was increased by 20% in the ozone therapy treated athletes, and 6% in the control group. I know this is just like a slide with numbers on it, but that's actually like a really big deal for that's a really big deal for professional athletes. Like a 28% increase in VO2 max is going to be like a big difference maker for people that are doing stamina sports, especially. So soccer players, runners, really anything that is a little bit more longer distance is going to be greatly helped. The anaerobic athletes would be assisted as well, just not to the same degree. So like people who are like heavy weightlifters would still get a benefit, but not nearly as much as like a marathon runner. This was another study that was actually similar. This is looking at anaerobic threshold. So as we're exercising, we're in an aerobic state, meaning that the oxygen that we're drawing in is basically we have a little bit of an excess of it, or being used at the same rate. So when we kick into anaerobic process as we're exercising, that essentially is a much less efficient way of creating energy. So that's where we have a lot of lactic acid buildup and where we start to really experience fatigue and start to get tired. So the idea is you want to stay aerobic as long as you can when you're exercising, because if you do that, you're not going to fatigue out nearly as quickly. So in this study, what they found is that ozone therapy, I think this was 5 treatments instead of 4 in the last one, but essentially they had a massive increase in the anaerobic threshold, and I think I failed to put the actual percentage or the average of the players here. This was, again, I think soccer players, but out of Italy. But they found a pretty big increase in raising that window. So if they stay aerobic for longer, again, pretty big deal for athletes. They're essentially going to be able to play their sport without fatiguing nearly as quickly. So like an example would be if you have a 20-minute workout and you did it 2 separate days. So say the first day you didn't do an ozone therapy treatment prior, but you're just working out for 20 minutes. And you start to get this really large sense of fatigue at like the 12-minute mark. And then say the next day you do the exact same workout, but this time you did ozone therapy prior. What you would experience is rather than getting that sense of fatigue at 12 minutes, you might get it at 17 minutes. So it basically prolongs that state before you start to fatigue out. So that's on the side of athletes. Well, what about people that are struggling with chronic fatigue syndrome? So they're not necessarily in great shape, but they definitely have an oxygen utilization issue. Well, this was a study done on 65 different patients. So they did IV ozone therapy twice a week for 1 month and twice a month as a maintenance therapy. So they used this scoring system called the Fatigue Severity Scale, which is used to estimate the severity of the symptoms, and they had a way of doing that. But they had 52 patients out of the 65 showed a significant improvement in symptomology, over 50% improvement in symptoms. So people with chronic fatigue syndrome were over 50% better just by doing IV ozone therapy a few times, twice a week for 1 month. So that's 8 treatments, and then twice a month as a maintenance therapy after that. That's just one tool. That's not like even looking at a comprehensive thing and saying like, you have chronic fatigue syndrome, we need to roll out all these different things. That is just one tool that gave those results. And you guys are aware, you're here, you're seeing some of the different things out there. That's why this is such like a powerful tool that you can use amidst all these other things, because we can start to get that person not just 50% better, but up to like 90% better, or hopefully just totally resolved. So microcirculation, a little bit of a grotesque picture here. That's a foot that's basically rotting because of lack of circulation to the area. So this is just kind of showing, you can see on the left side, a lot of circulation issues. The body is not healing. It generally grows, gets worse, that kind of thing. And then on the right side, after I think it was just a few IV ozone treatments, that started to clear up. So that's why I was saying with microcirculation, it's super powerful. Spike protein causing Lowe formation, fixed by ozone. We are recording, so I can't go into this too much, but if you're familiar with the stuff that has happened in the last couple of years and the issues that causes people, it's due to something called the spike protein, which is causing the blood to clot together, and it's called a Lowe formation. And that's giving people strokes, that's giving them heart attacks, that's giving them a lack of energy, long hauler symptoms, things like that. So there's not any clinical studies that have been done on this that can verify it, but I've been working with a lot of doctors on, not that I'm doing the treatment, but just communicating with them. And it seems to be pretty reliably breaking up these Lowe formations and actually helping resolve the spike protein issue, which is a self-replicating toxin. So your body's not necessarily just dumping it out, it's actually replicating itself and getting worse over the long haul. So that's why you want to get it out as soon as you can. And we have a really good article written by Dr. Tom Levy on our website, Doctors Ozone, drsozone.com, that you can go and check out that gives like a protocol that can help get rid of some of these issues. I'm going to skip this one. It helps with blood flow. There's a bunch of clinical trials. It's really good. But this one is, this is what I thought was really interesting with ozone therapy, is because it almost seems intelligent. So this was a study that they did on cerebral blood flow, so blood flow going to the brain. And what they found is if there were parts of the brain that were hypoxic, meaning that they were not getting oxygen delivery to that area, they were not getting blood flow, well then ozone therapy supplied a boost to that area. So then it started to get proper oxygen delivery, started to get proper blood flow, and it started to normalize some of those functions. But on the flip side, let's say like you're just a healthy person, your brain is doing great. It didn't really get that boost. It got like a little bit, but it was a very strong difference, and it was regional too. So it was like this part of the brain needs an uptick, it's going to get it. And this part of the brain doesn't need it, so it's not going to get that boost. So it's really fascinating in the sense that ozone seems intelligent. But it's not ozone again, right? We said that it's a catalyst. So it's a catalyst for your body to be able to perform as it ought to. So a catalyst is not the thing going in and forcing the body to do these things, and ozone's not, oh, this part of the brain could use a little blood flow, this brain could not. No, that's the intelligence of your body knowing what to do once it has this stimulus. And so that's really the cool part about it. And that, in a nutshell, really summarizes what ozone therapy is doing. Like, it does this across a lot of different parameters. It does this across the oxygen efficiency, the immune system, the blood flow, the microcirculation, all that different stuff. It's doing it in a very intelligent manner and allowing the body to deliver the needs that it has to the right areas. This is a study that was done on preconditioning in rats, but essentially the idea is like, hey, if you take ozone therapy and then you undergo a heart attack, what would happen? Would it be better if you did ozone therapy prior? And the answer in this study was yes. So you can see the heart on the left. So they essentially gave some rats ozone therapy, some rats just got infrared treatment, so infrared lights on the outside going in. And then the sham group, which is they didn't do anything. They just, they didn't give them any sort of treatment. And then after giving the treatments and some time goes by, they induce a heart attack in the rats, and then they look at the hearts to see, well, how did the heart perform? And they found that the group that had ozone therapy plus the infrared light, I don't know exactly why they did infrared light, but they did. That group, almost had normal heart function after the heart attack in comparison with the sham group and just the infrared light. So this study shows prevention of heart disease in rats by preconditioning with ozone therapy, attenuating mitochondrial damage. And there's a Dr. David Minkoff, that did a study looking, he's been doing this stuff forever. So I think I can't remember how many years, but it was like he regularly gave ozone treatments to a group of patients for something like 25 years. And then he had another group of patients that were not getting ozone treatment. And this was all self-selected. He was just tracking it. So it wasn't like a formal study or anything like that. But he did document it at least. But what he found was like people who went through like a difficult life event, say like a car accident or a major trauma or a brain injury or something of that nature, were a lot more likely to heal up faster and live through it than if they had not been doing ozone therapy. So it can be really helpful in just like preventing issues from happening because, again, we're just allowing our body to be able to navigate those situations well. We already talked about oxidative stress, but this is what is happening to the cells as that balance gets out of whack. The oxidants start to break it down. But ozone therapy helps with that because it helps our body to endogenous and naturally produce antioxidants. So antioxidants are really important for a whole lot of stuff, just like that heart attack. If you have better antioxidant production, you have better cell protection, so your cells are not going to break down in the same way. So if we can improve endogenous antioxidant production, so my body, like glutathione is a supplement you take, right? So that's an antioxidant that you take to, hopefully make the cells healthier and all that kind of stuff. But the idea with ozone therapy is that it's not a supplement, it's a catalyst. And now your body is naturally creating that stuff on its own, which is ideal because it's according to your bio-individuality and it's according to you and your needs. So that's I'm not saying don't take glutathione. I take it, I think it's great. But that's a much better place to be in is when your body is naturally producing this stuff on its own so it knows how to allocate it and use those resources. So this is a study done on ozone therapy and the prevention and treatment of chemotherapy-induced toxicity. So as you guys know, if you go through chemotherapy, you get very, very sick, right? Hair falls out, you feel nauseous. It's a lot of downside to it in terms of quality of life. But what they found in the study is that because it increases this antioxidant production, people have a 70% improved quality of life if they're undergoing ozone therapy while doing chemo. So it's like, if you know anybody that's doing chemo, in my mind, this is like in hyperbaric oxygen too, is one of the best things you can do because just for, an hour a week, getting an IV or doing it at home for an hour a week or whatever it is, those negative symptoms are reduced by over 70%. And that's another really, really massive thing with ozone therapy. And it's pretty well studied for that. There's a lot of good studies out of Italy that show that. But really phenomenal improving quality of life for people undergoing chemo. So what are the different people that usually do ozone therapy? What are the different groups? Well, there's chronic disease. So the 5 most common are cancer, Lyme, autoimmune, infectious disease, mold toxicity. But there's actually over 150 different indications that's studied for. It's just those are the 5 most common that the market is kind of set on. Performance enhancement, again, can be really helpful for athletes. You don't fatigue as quickly, you feel like you have more energy, and so it's a great sensation from that standpoint. We have a lot of professional teams that use our equipment and do the IVs and do all that good stuff. Biohacking and anti-aging, because it's helping to mitigate the chronic oxidative stress cycle, increase antioxidants, theoretically you age slower, so hopefully a little bit more gracefully and all that good stuff, which I think we all hope for. We talked about the benefits of ozone therapy because that's really my favorite part of this whole job and this whole work is the life that it brings. So we go through like charts and we talk about antioxidants and we talk about these different things, but what it really does with people is the amazing part, like the lives that you change with it. So there was 3 quick testimonies in this video. This was Amber, had a stroke, was paralyzed and couldn't talk and started doing ozone treatments and gain back that function because of the microcirculation, the oxygen delivery, and able to normalize brain function. She actually has kind of an interesting story with it. I actually just went and met her in Utah recently and talked with her because I'm friends with her husband and we connected, but she has to do it every week, otherwise she reverts back into that state because she had so much damage to the brain. So kind of an interesting case in the sense that it's like an ongoing thing for her, so it's not going to permanently fix the damage that was there. But that's incredible because she's a wife and a mother and a friend, and helps with the business that they're doing, and so she has all that autonomy and ability to live her life in the way that she that she can. So that's really what I love about ozone therapy, and there's a couple other cool stories in there like that. What are reasons to avoid ozone therapy? They're called contraindications. Why should we not do this treatment? Or in what states should we not do this treatment? Pregnancy, being drunk, so if you're drunk, don't do it. Anemia, blood clotting issues, so like not that you have clots, but that your blood is unable to form clots because it helps with the circulation of the blood flow and the blood rheology. So if you make that, more thin, it's just gonna cause more problems. So heart instability or recent heart attack, hemochromatosis. And then G6PD deficiency, I have a long explanation on that, but basically don't worry about it. This is a dated slide. It should say over 150 serious indications, but a quick list of things that it's been studied for and works in a lot of different areas. And again, I used to be, when I would see something like that, I was like, massive red flag, right? Like, this guy's saying it does everything. But what really changed in my mind was like understanding that it's not the ozone. The ozone, yes, is a stimulus, the catalyst, but it truly is your body doing the work. And so if we can set, like with keto or whatever, the body in the proper conditions to be able to heal itself, that's all we're doing. So that can do a lot of different stuff, right? It's kind of like saying, what are the benefits of exercise? Well, there would probably be this laundry list of 5 million things. And you're like, how could a drug do that? Or how could a therapy do that? Well, it kind of makes sense when you understand exercise is just improving everything and allowing your body to have the appropriate things that it needs to heal itself. So that's why it can be used in so many different areas. Real quick, how to do ozone. There's ways to do it at home. There's ways to do it in a clinic. IVs in the clinic are the best. You can also do it for joints, for injuries and that kind of thing. At home, not glamorous, but it works pretty well, is the rectal or vaginal insufflation, and those are a systemic treatment, so they have all the benefits of what we've been talking about, and would be like an at-home counterpart to doing the IVs. By the way, because I know I'm short on time, if you guys want to get an IV done, you can go down to our booth downstairs and sign up for an IV for free. And there's Anita and Christy down there that will do that for you. At a very high level, all the different treatments of ozone therapy fit into 2 different categories for the most part. It's either systemic, meaning it's benefiting the whole body, or it's local, meaning it's benefiting one area. So I can put like a bag around my hand if I have MRSA on there, and it'll help to clear up that infection, but it's not gonna like give all that systemic response to my body. So these would be examples of things that are for the whole body, that systemic reaction that's happening, IV, rectal, and vaginal. Just for the treated area would be like joint injections, bagging, sauna, ear, boo, ozone water, and I know you guys don't know all this stuff. We have a website that has so much information and is pretty easy to navigate. If we're putting an oxidant into the gut, how does that affect the biome? Well, it's kind of interesting because they've done studies on this in the case of intestinal dysbiosis, which is your gut is not regulating the biome very well, so it's out of line. But what they found is when you do rectal insufflation, and actually in 76% of the patients corrected that to a normalized gut function and microbiome. And so essentially what's happening is there's a small amount of gas. It does kill off some of the good bacteria in that little place, but we're not using much. But it creates a good terrain for the proper microbiome to take place. So that's what's happening with it. We work with a lot of cool people. It's just to build credibility. And I would say, like, if you're just hearing about this, it's not the time to buy equipment, but just to have an understanding of it, maybe for future years, maybe to start looking into it and start to wrap your head around it and what it is. But the place to go is actually, that's the equipment site. So like I said, there's a training entity as well. That's drzone.com, and that's where you guys want to go to get information about this. So if you go to drzone.com, there's a guide that you can get on the website that'll walk you through everything you need to know. And then there's a bunch of really well-written articles on the website that cover everything. And then there's videos at the top of most articles. So that's really the place you want to go if you're interested in learning more about it. And all the equipment costs about $1,800 to get everything you need. So she asked, why is it not applicable to people with anemia? Well, I would say it can be. So the reason that document was created with those contraindications is because The people that put together this document that's kind of laying the groundwork for what ozone therapy will be in the future are trying to mitigate risk. They're trying to mitigate the potential for anything going wrong. So they take something like anemia and say, all right, if a doctor is a cowboy and decides, I want to do really high doses of ozone therapy, that can actually cause a problem for people with anemia. So we're just going to make it a contraindication so nobody applies it to anemia. But when I actually talked with the researchers and scientists and doctors that helped to put this document together, they said, yeah, we put that on there, but you actually can. It's just you have to start at a lower schedule and slowly work your way up, and it does still help with those issues. It's just you have to find a doctor that's really experienced in that to make sure that you're not overdoing it. They're just trying to avoid the cowboys